Welcome to another episode of the Financially Independent SLP. I saw a very interesting article by the Economic Policy Institute that talked about the productivity pay gap. They mentioned that the gap between productivity and a typical worker's compensation has increased dramatically since 1979. Basically, what the Institute shared was that they did like a productivity and pay tracker. And they noticed the change between 1979 all the way up to beyond the pandemic to 2021. The productivity requirements raised by like 64.6%, but the hourly pay only raised 17.3%. And this is across the board, no matter the field. And most Americans most anyone would agree that, a rising tide should lift all boats. So, in our little boat of speech-language pathology, let's talk about productivity. Definition: what is productivity anyway? In a nutshell, productivity is the measure by which or how much time a speech-language pathologist spends with patients divided by the amount of time the therapist is clocked in. Productivity is talked about across multiple fields, but for the sake of this channel and this video, we will only talk about productivity in the context of a speech-language pathologist. I can provide some examples. So let's say you are an SLP and you are on the clock for 8 hours and your job decided to give you a 90% productivity requirement. That means your goal is to work with patients for 7 hours and 12 minutes with only 48 minutes left for everything else. If they wanted 95% productivity, that would give you only 24 minutes to do everything else. If they wanted 88-ish% productivity, that would be close to treating directly for 7 hours in an 8-hour day clocked in. And then if they wanted 75% productivity, that means for about 480 minutes or 8 hours clocked in, you worked for 360 minutes or 6 hours of direct patient treatment. When I say everything else, right, for the directors in the room or supervisors or admins that may not have a background in speech-language pathology, what could that mean? That might mean talking to family members, interviewing them about medical case history, reading through charts, screening to find out the history of the patient, finding diagnoses, talking to the doctors, talking to the pharmacist, calling the pharmacy to find out, if the patient has difficulty swallowing, if you're in a medical setting, if we can alter the pills, because some patients, maybe they need things crushed, right? But if it's not bioavailable, meaning if their body is not able to manage the medicine in the way it should be managed, if we alter the medicine, we're going to have a conversation with the pharmacist about that. What if they come in through admissions, but they have no speech therapy notes and we're in the nursing home? We have to call the hospital and track down their speech therapy notes. We have to find out if they had a swallow evaluation. Maybe they sent over a disc of their swallow evaluation. We have to take the time to view that. We have to find the patient. We have to schedule things. Maybe we have to call the ENT to follow up on a patient that has an esophageal issue. So there are many different things that is required of a speech-language pathologist. Back-to-back treatment is not always possible. So let's talk about that magic 90% that a lot of therapists are very stressed out about. Is 90% even possible? Rare to occasionally, I would say it depends on the building, and it's a very rare yes. And I will share how I ethically accomplished that during a few travel assignments. But is this 90% consistently sustainable for an evaluating SLP or clinician to do this every day ethically? I would say no. No. So thus later in the video, I will be sure to share with you some resources that help me to self-advocate, that did help me to kind of raise my productivity a little bit. But again, ethically. Do not work off the clock. Please do not. So I aim to be as objective in this video as possible because there are some amazing facilities out there. And there are some supervisors who are SLPs who want to help both the patients and clinicians as well as the facility with their revenue. So if the facility forecloses due to lack of revenue or funds, guess what? The patients don't have a place to stay, to be seen, nor to receive our services. We want to kind of try to look at this from both sides of the coin as best as possible and come together for a happy little compromise. Ethically. I speak in the context for most of this video of skilled nursing homes, but if you wanted specific settings to be addressed, I can do that because as a travel therapist, I have had experience in different settings. If you want specific finance-related discussions for your personal setting, just make a request in the comment below so I can make it happen. Let's briefly talk about ethics. So, quick definition, the American Medical Association looks at medical ethics as a framework or principles of morality that govern the practice of clinical medicine. In the ASHA Code of Ethics, certified members and non-members of ASHA that are certified, that means we have our CCC. It includes applicants for ASHA certification as well. All of us are expected to abide by the Code of Ethics. So what should we look at to advocate for ethical service delivery? Well, one, we have the autonomy to use our clinical judgment. So we want to advocate to make sure that we are using what we find to be clinically relevant and clinically appropriate. We want to meet, if they're ethical and make sense, and the needs and wants of our patients. So if I am ever in question when I'm working at a facility, guess what? I refer back to the Code of Ethics as part of my self-advocacy. And I also email the ASHA Ethics Committee. That's what they're there for. I email the ASHA Ethics Committee if I have questions, especially if I have a supervisor who's telling me their strategies that they want me to implement to maintain a very high level of productivity, and I might have a concern about patient or quality of care. Also, something I found out along the course of my career was that there was a huge difference between ethics and legality, and it was not fun to find out the difference. It was very difficult for me as a clinical fellow decades ago to learn that in some skilled nursing facility environments, or just in environments in general, that there's law and then there's ethics. There are things out there that can be completely unethical to us as speech pathologists, but somehow are found within the accordance of the law. We want to make certain that we are aware of legalities in our respective states, what is legal to do or not do versus what we perceive as not ethical. Because when we're pushing back or trying to self-advocate or trying to make changes in our environment, we want to make sure that we have our wording correct when we advocate, because it makes all the difference. And it supports our credibility when we make statements to our administrators. Because if we say, hey, this is not legal, when it in fact is, what we're really talking about is ethics, then it doesn't really help our credibility when we're trying to state our case. CMS is on our side too. We can definitely email CMS because they're looking out for the patients in their policies. I'm emailing you because my director is asking me to do X, Y, and Z, and I would like to know if this is something that's within the confines of your protocol or your policies. May I have something to support this in writing or to negate this in writing? And then you being able to use that document, now you have something to point to that's not you, and you're creating a way to advocate through your evidence. It's not just like a he say versus she say between you and your administrator, you or your supervisor, etc. I have zero issues asking someone if I'm not sure about something. Feel free to email ASHA Ethics, ASHA Governance. I found their answers extremely useful in being able to push back. I've even gone back to work after a weekend and said, I've spoken with my certifying body, the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association, and they said it gives a weight to it when you highlight that you spoke to an entire organization about some policy your job came up with for the sake of productivity. And also what has helped me is, may I have that in writing? If what they are asking you is truly shady, chances are you won't get it in writing. And if I don't see it, I'm following what my clinical judgment and autonomy give me. If they are shady and bold, sometimes they might try to send you something. So you may want to anonymously review any concerns that you have with your ombudsman. There I go, throwing out more jargon, right? So just in case you didn't know, an ombudsman, by the way, is a public official who handles complaints against long-term care facilities or skilled nursing homes. And yes, myself, the PT, the OT, we have happily either anonymously or individually reached out to our ombudsman to ask questions about certain things that we saw in the facilities. And yes, it can make a difference. Okay, so back to productivity. Why does a facility care so much about clinicians being billable? Because let's pat ourselves on the back a little here. If you are going about your day educating staff, speaking with caregivers, conducting administrative duties for your caseload, treating patients, doing paperwork, everything we do is productive and it's needed to do a good job. But why the focus on being billable for these number crunchers? Say it with me, profit margin. There's a word you might hear a lot on episodes of Shark Tank. Why do they care so much about profit margin? Let's look at some numbers. According to sharpsheets.io, running a nursing home in the United States with, say, approximately 40 units on average costs about $278,000 to $293,000 per month. Does that number sound a little astronomical to you? Roughly 1/4 of facility costs specific to nursing homes can be for medical supplies supplies, and drink or food alone. Paying staff in the facility is about 1/2 of all costs, if not a little more, depending on the facility. Environmental services, sometimes referred to as housekeeping, can run up to 1/10 of all costs. Let me slow down a little and reflect a bit on profit margin. So profit margin definition, that's when you take the revenue earned and subtract the cost to determine the percentage of profit. When the who I call number crunchers look at their facts and figures, they are looking at ways to improve profit margin, kind of like your own personal financial goals. You either try to get more income or drop some activities or expenses so you can keep more of your money. Likewise, the number crunchers may try to improve profit margin through increasing revenue by inflating productivity requirements or by cutting down on expenses. What are some solutions to this mayhem? We know going above 80 to 85%, depending on the building, is just not necessarily the most ethically sustainable for most environments. It contributes to burnout and then leads to high turnover of speech-language pathologists or staff shortages. And these companies should really consider, are you making money not having clinicians in the building? This opens the door to cut even more corners and thus have reduced quality in overall patient care. That's bad for the patients and for business. Some productivity solutions. What are some ways that we as clinicians can combat this profit margin drive? We can advocate for ourselves by showing the facility that as clinicians working ethically, we actually can offer alternative ways for them to increase revenue. 1. We can co-develop marketing tools that highlight what SLPs actually do to attract more patients for them that are appropriate for speech caseload to the facility. We can help fill beds. 2. We can become familiar with and befriend the admissions department to review who would be the most appropriate candidates for skilled services and who may benefit from a referral to another facility if they are looking for long-term non-skilled services. It is important to be honest here with patients who are looking for a place to let them know whether or not they will have an opportunity to be seen by the rehab department depending on their condition. And then also don't create like a mill where you turn away patients just because either, because that's not right. Okay, number 3, we can become more competent. I cannot tell you how many clinicians I have counseled respectfully who did not realize how vast our scope was and how much we can contribute to patients in the nursing home facility. I've included a link to a medical screener that myself have used with nurses and other staff to help refer patients to speech therapy. It saved me a lot of time trying to be the Lone Ranger in building up caseload. And that medical screener, I am required to inform you, my partnership with them does afford me a small commission if you end up purchasing their affordable screener. Number 4, we can increase our certifications and professional development that can attract more clients to the nursing home as a selling point. Number 5, we can highlight how we can save the facility a lot of money through advocating for instrumental exams to comprehensively assess, diagnose, and as indicated, treat the real dysphagia diagnosis and or underlying pathology or pathophysiology. The cost of dysphagia, another video, is an entirely different video, so please just stay tuned. But listen, the cost of thickened liquids and wasted food from modified diet dislike, it's just so astronomical. Then you have readmissions to hospitals from dehydration or malnutrition, wound breakdowns. There's so many different things that's reflected in not being given the tools up front for us to do our job as dysphagia clinicians. And this can actually be reflected in their profit margin, right? If we're treating those patients that have those swallow issues and putting up that money for the instrumentals and making wise decisions with it and helping them get off of the modified diets, the thickened liquids, then we can have an increase or boost in profit margin by reducing the cost of what's going on in the kitchen. So giving quality care upfront and taking care of us SLP clinicians helps everybody. And that rising tide can help all boats. So let's promote that by showing them the numbers. Number 6. Consider discussing strategies about efficiency with your supervisor and see if you can delegate some screens to train staff or related therapies with an SLP red flag checklist, or refer to SLP if you see type chart. So again, I kind of mentioned that earlier, how there was like a little medical SLP screener that I've used, and you honestly can create your own. But I met a seasoned SLP once who told me if she can find an item that will make her life easier when she's working, she will not lose 5 minutes of sleep just to reinvent the wheel. Testimonial. And she was the one who, in fact, introduced me to stores such as Teachers Pay Teachers. I had never heard of it before this season SLP. Or there's another one called OutSchool, and I've bought so much from other clinicians. I actually would look for others' names on tags at ASHA conventions and thank them for their products in person, like some little nerdy fangirl, because it was just helpful. So number 7, have the company confirm what the actual productivity rate is by requesting their policy to be sent to you in writing. There have been times when I was targeted by our director to meet a standard that was literally 12% above the company requirement. Like, why? She was just trying to make her building look good for her own promotion. And that's not right for the patient nor for the clinician. Hello? My colleague, who was an OT fresh out of graduate school, actually wanted to quit her field in those conditions. How sad is that? Because she was a really good OT. Number 8, are you capturing all of what's truly billable for your setting? Know the billing rules for your state and setting. You can always check with your Medicare Administrative Contractor, MAC, MAC, for your state to be certain. I'll link the cms.gov MAC by state in the description below for your convenience. But in general, in some outpatient centers, according to the MonteroTherapyServices.com website, time required to adjust equipment or prepare the treatment area for skilled rehab is the setup time and is included in the count of minutes of therapy delivered to the resident. Me personally, I like to have the resident during setup as my just in case brain kind of counts, direct line of sight with patient training, point of service, and setup is billable, and double check your State Practice Act and check with ASHA governance if ever in doubt. Number 9. Look at any gaps that might impact productivity. Regardless of them wanting 90%, can we show effort on our end by declaring, look, my plan is to increase my productivity by 5% for this month, this week, for 3 days in a row. Sometimes when you demonstrate that you can do more than the number you are giving and you share openly the barriers that just don't make what they are asking for sustainable, then you may get more of a collaborative workaround and less of, this kind of tension or contention in the workplace. I tend to average around 83%. There's some good buildings where I can get 88% because I have 2 rehab techs that help me. That's not every building. That's just not every building. I can guarantee you I've more often than not hit the so-called requirements every single time. And, nobody canned me. I'll say it that way. So number 10, there is a pamphlet. Oh, let me go back. So nobody canned me, and I also kept communication open. So I was constantly giving, my barriers to standards that they had using number 10. So number 10, there is a pamphlet about ethical productivity with some tips about how to be more ethically productive that, again, I found helpful. They were helpful to me. They aren't specifically a sponsor for this video, but I am required to inform you that I do get a small commission from their store if you buy their ethical productivity pamphlet, which I have linked in the description below. If you just want to hear a few tips, I'm literally going to share with you a couple of tips that I found helpful that were in the pamphlet, and I do have permission to share, so that you can have, some free content. Why not? On how I was able to secure some 90% weeks. Okay, so for those who like to have a list in written form, as I'm kind of like that, I did leave the link in my description below for your convenience. All right, let's move on. Number 11, I emphasize higher productivity standards are not always possible, if ever, in every building, and certainly not consistently sustainable, not ethically. So do not work off the clock. This just creates a toxic environment for everybody and for clinicians that are working the way we're supposed to. And it can be a challenge being a travel therapist or a permanent therapist, a covering therapist, per diem therapist, anybody therapist, as sometimes they want productivity for travel therapists to be even higher than what they demand of direct hire therapists because, say it with me, profit margin. So let's get to it. When I was successful, when I did get ethically 90% days, how did I do it? Number 1, if there was one in the building, I utilized the rehab technician. It was very foreign to them, the concept of being needed by the SLP. They thought we just had a magic carpet or something and flew around the building and did things. No. So I would give my rehab technician my schedule the previous day via email, text, group chat, Dropbox, messenger pigeon, whatever, or early in the morning because he would come in before us. And I would stress to him that just like PT needs their patients, I need mine, back to back, please. And I would have them lined up in their wheelchair walker or sitting in a chair in a row, ready to see me back to back. And I would arrange with OT or PT to grab whomever is either waiting or needs to head back to their room upstairs. So it mitigated the need for me to run around looking for patients. I would have them in different areas where OT or PT knew to look. So sometimes a nice little activity area where activities was not doing anything at that time, a little quiet area, a little nook, library area, sometimes the gym, sometimes there were 2 gyms, so the OT gym was quieter. So it really depends. I would use like the little dividers, the little screen doors to kind of separate so they had their privacy as well. All right, number 2, I began to use the residual skills of higher level patients to help me prep materials without breaking HIPAA laws for the next or after next session. It reduced my prep time and still afforded me the opportunity to have creative, meaningful, functional, and quality sessions. Number 3, I would find the patients on caseload who were naturally up early and see them before anyone else. I would plan my documentation time in one chunk and time myself to get as much as I could done in less than 50 minutes. Was that always possible? No, but on really good days, it happened and it was really helpful. Number 4, I would involve families in my point of service documentation if they were present. It allowed me to engage in billable caregiver education, give and receive skilled feedback, and also type as they were talking interactively about what they noticed or didn't notice during this session. When I did move around the building, number 5, I would see patients on caseload on the same floor first and see them as back-to-back as possible, while also having a set time. I would invite staff to meet me in the gym to discuss patients, to reduce the, hey, speech, I have a question stoppages that would take up time that I needed to literally do everything else on my plate, pun intended, since I had dysphagia on my caseload. Number 6, let's see, what else did I do? Every time I created a goal or built a goal, I did add it to a draft email within my company email, and eventually had different templates in my work email that I could just go and pull up and use as a baseline for writing my notes and evaluations and reports. And it helps me, just that's how I work cognitively, to look at something while I'm typing to kind of help me type faster, and then I'm not sitting there trying to like process from scratch so long what I wanted to say by having a skeleton to look at and start with. It also helps even when I'm building goals too, because some of the items that you're building goals, click, Dropbox, click, Dropbox, sometimes it helps to have a starting point to look like, okay, how do I want to build this goal? Charlie Brown. So the pamphlet that I talked about earlier did have other tips that I'm not remembering. So at least I was able to share a few there. Okay, you know what? I forgot to mention the word I learned from the American Academy of Family Physicians article that I read decades ago. Efficiency. We want to clinically practice in an economical way that still provides quality care. That's pretty much what efficiency is supposed to be. The article, even though it's super old, it talked about ways to retain medical professionals. I'll throw the link in the description below for those who may want to read it. And it talks about the ideal medical practice model, improving efficiency, quality, and the doctor-patient relationship, or in this case, the speech-language pathology patient and just facility relationship. There was also an article from HIMSS, the HIMSS website, not sure if you're aware of it. It's HIMSS.org, and they featured an article that talked about a survey that was conducted where 84% of the respondents that streamlined their online or IT infrastructure were able to better retain clinicians. Again, I'm just kind of throwing articles out there to share that, regardless of the field, this has been talked about with trying to alter efficiency in an environment that can help reduce stress, it can reduce burnout, and it can reduce or mitigate just plain chaos. I flat out told one company after 3 weeks of frantically running from building to building that if they want to see my productivity increase, they need to get rid of a building and help me with my efficiency, because traveling between the buildings was not efficient. It was ruining my ability to be more productive and kind of engage with different collaborative team members. I was able, just pushing back on that by dropping a building. It was 4 buildings. I increased my productivity ethically from dropping buildings, and I went from 69% to 76% to 83%, and respectively ended up at 85%. That still wasn't the target that they wanted, but the dramatic increase got them to get off my back. It was a huge plus, and the regional was happy, and I was not their target anymore as the travel therapy person for that time. And it spoke volumes to them that they saw my efforts, and I did that ethically. Okay, so efficiency is frequently out of our control at times, but we can use, my example in our responses of pushback, so if we're getting that big talk from our administrators, we can make efforts to show them, hey, we're willing to help, but never at the expense of quality patient care. I prefer to be a service provider, not a fundraiser. Let's collaboratively work together here to see what we can do. Another thing to consider is, are we seeing patients for more minutes than we can bill for, which can impact the revenue? That's a scheduling issue that the manager or whoever does the scheduling will have to be mindful of. We need to embrace the power of speech homework and home practice, even for patients who live in the facility. The insurance companies oftentimes may limit our times with the patients depending on if they're like managed care, Part A, Part B, bundle, all these other different things, HMO, PPO, right? And the insurance company limiting our time with patients does not mean that they get to limit our effectiveness. Let's say we have families that visit. Guess what? I'm taking that time to educate the families that visit on what we worked on and how they can help, right? Or CNAs or nurses or activities directors or volunteers. If there are people who have HIPAA clearance, of course, to work with the patient and they show an interest in the particular patient, then guess what? Everyone has their favorites, and not us as clinicians, because we're not a respecter of persons. I'm just talking about everyone that visits or CNAs or anything like that. Let's utilize these individuals as a strength and say, hey, I see you spending time with Mr. X. He's his own power of attorney. He gave me permission to share these with you. Did you know that we were working on X, Y, and Z, and he could really benefit from these strategies? Or you could say his sister is POA. They gave me permission to share these exercises with you to work on them. Here, work on them with them. Let me know what you think. I'd love your feedback on this management of these exercises in preparation for maybe a functional maintenance program, or in preparation for discharge, or in preparation for trying to analyze carryover, whatever. I'm rambling out of excitement, but you as an accomplished citizen in this field, you know what is best for your patient, and let's get creative and find ways to ethically cross-train. Another thing to consider when it comes to good old productivity and efficiency is, have I officially conducted in-services to document that I trained someone in strategies with the patients? Because while I'm talking about cross-training, guess what? I don't cross-train without in-service. I sign things. I get things signed because we want to document what you're doing. So with permission, absolutely. I try to start training from day one, whether it's family or staff, through in-services. Did I make sure the patient was present so I could demonstrate on and with them, and they could do some teach back for the CNAs and nurses in attendance? Say it with me. I've been able to get permission to do that billably. You heard me correctly. I would obtain permission to utilize one training session to teach the patient something whilst also doing a small in-service to have everybody learning a technique at the same time. Depending on the facility, I could really make this work. But again, if you're not sure, you're like, she sounds crazy, I'm asking ASHA, please. Ask ASHA everything, because I do not do things without written permission if I'm not sure via an email through ASHA Ethics Committee or ASHA Governance. I can't tell you how many times I've utilized their services. So if I sound nuts rambling, forgive my excitement, but I really do like to get clearance on everything because things keep changing. I feel like every October it's new rules. It goes back, it goes forward, it goes sideways, it goes ups and down, it goes in a rhombus. So, and I also email CMS questions as well because I want to make sure that what I'm doing is quality care and reimbursable and, again, skilled. So I emailed the Department of Aging questions, ASHA Ethics, ASHA Governance. I'm repeating myself just so you know that I'm very big on confirming that I am within legal and ethical means when conducting tasks. Okay, so those are just some accounts that have helped me. I'm not telling you what to do or to go out and do them yourself. Know your state rules. Every state is different, and I wasn't able to do the same thing in every state that I traveled to, just saying, because things change and you want to protect your license at all costs. So most importantly, take care of yourself. You cannot give quality care if you are feeling down in the dumps about running around like a chicken with your head cut off. In my travels, I have seen clinicians just cut very strange corners, and the PT and I have had to get together and say, hey, now we have to call the Ombudsman if we don't fix this, and do intervention with them to help them protect their licensure and to help them protect their patients, right? And I did have one SLP, well, a few, but I remember one specific SLP who personally thanked me for changing her work structure and her life because she was miserable with what she was doing. And she was able to graduate to not working off the clock, right? We don't work off the clock. Don't do that. I never worked off the clock. I refuse. I didn't let people bully me into sacrificing my patient's normal licensure. So if you feel that you are under pressure to do gray area things just for the sake of someone else's profit margins, then please consider my handy dandy copywritten Clinician Productivity Sanity Pledge. And it goes as such. The Clinician Productivity Sanity Pledge. 1, I will not allow anyone to force me to see patients who do not demonstrate medically necessary needs for clinical services. 2, I will not spend countless unpaid hours completing documentation off the clock. 3, I will not falsely document daily progress in hopes of mitigating Medicare payment denials. 4, I will not sacrifice the quality of life nor my service to patients in exchange for a paycheck. 5, I will have the courage to leave or remove myself from toxic work environments. 6, I will locate SLPs who have found wonderful companies or buildings that work with integrity and take care of their patients ethically. 7, I will find ways to ethically address my productivity if it is unreasonably low by objective and ethical standards through strategies and open communication with my superiors, and I will push back if what they are asking is just not possible. So Disclaimer, this is just for informational and entertainment purposes. Clinicians are to exercise their autonomy and use their own clinical judgment and evidence-based resources in real time as things change from day to day. You must follow the rules that govern your state and national certifying bodies. I am not a financial advisor, and I'm not out here just randomly giving advice, just sharing information. Thank you for tuning in.